Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Hi, it's Ed again, and this is Global TV Talk Show on globalbusinessnews.net. I'm in San Diego, California. It's a sunny day. Summer has arrived here. The June gloom has parted. It's supposed to be near 90 degrees along the coast here today. And our very special guest today is Dr. Andrew Woods, who's in Vancouver, British Columbia. So what's the weather there today?
Good to see you again, Ed. I was just going to say that as you are speaking of sunshine, and it's all gloom and doom outside right now. You know, the Northwest, it tends to rain on a fairly regular basis, but this summer has been a little bit too wet. But I see that is changing. So the rest of the week looks like it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, there's some kind of high pressure off the coast that's going to heat us all up.
Bring it on.
Yeah, for a little bit. Yeah. So, my friend, I thank you very much and congratulations on the publishing of your book. Producer Paul, if you could please show that front cover of this beautiful book about Guanxi. So Guanxi in modern China, that's two characters, right? The left and the right.
Yes.
There's one is guan and the other shi, is that it?
Yes, which literally translates to the gate and the connection, or gate and connection. So I guess if you were to translate it directly into English, it would sort of mean, getting through the gate to get to the connection to take things further.
Okay, so let's talk about what this really means, okay? And all of this relates to business people around the world who would like to or considering the idea of exporting their product into China. First of all, is that possible today? I mean, China may not want our products,
I disagree. I think it's very possible. If you look at, despite all the rhetoric coming out of Western governments, if you look at the actual sales, the investments in China are actually going up in many areas. It's a great, if you take the politics out of it, and I tend to not focus on that because I think we have made mistakes ourselves. And I think that if you take the politics out of it, there's a fabulous opportunity for Western firms to export their goods to China. I mean, there's 1.4 billion people, there's 400 million middle-class people, and there's a very much, I'm not sure if it's a kudos, but it's the idea that Western products are perceived as maybe being healthier, being from countries where the environmental conditions might be better. So there's opportunities for food products, for technology, for all kinds of things that we have that could benefit the Chinese people, and of course vice versa. They've got a lot of wonderful things that they send to us. So opportunities moving forward are phenomenal.
Well, let's talk about relationships. Now, relationships do not mean, in this instance, does not mean transactions, right?
Yes, I mean, relationships are more of a, you know, I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of different countries and do business in a lot of different countries, and I found there's elements to the way people do business that differ considerably. And in China, it's about relationship first. So as an example, a lot of Americans who go over to China get incredibly frustrated because they want to cut to the chase after maybe meeting one, whereas the Chinese host might say, well, I'd like to take you to this temple. I'd like to learn about this. I'd like to have dinner with you. And they often want, you know, in some ways, it's a fabulous tactic because the American or Western person might get frustrated because they're not used to this, and they might concede various make concessions. So it's interesting because I learned quite quickly, you know, to take in those things and enjoy the culture and to not rush. But it can be challenging if your head office is telling you, you know, you need to make a deal in X amount of days. So it's like in Chinese culture, it's relationship first, get to know you, and then we cut into the business. I think we're a little less so here in the West. That's just my own take on it.
So I was reading part of the book, and it struck me, well, in several ways, but it struck me that there is, throughout the writings in that extract that I read, particularly near the end, there was an extraordinary reference to Chinese business people. The nature of Chinese business people is to be introverted. Now, I don't know whether I'm misreading that or not, but that's what it sounded like, or that was just an attitude towards doing business or understand or trying to be careful with strangers.
I don't think I'm not sure if I'd say introverted. Just a different culture, different ways of reacting to certain situations. I mean, I mentioned earlier the trust issue is very big. I think that's why historically, and that's why the issue is, I want to get to know you. I want to know more about you before I jump right into something. You know, my wife always says to me, don't trust anyone except for your family. And maybe that in China, and maybe that makes a lot of sense anywhere, really. I think that trust is something that takes longer to gain. And that might be just from a less advanced legal system, perhaps, but trust is something that takes quite some time. But back to your initial question, introverts, no, just maybe more taking a little bit slower in some ways to jump to decision making. And again, I see that changing a lot among the younger generation. It's interesting because, you know, we tend to look at these situations and say, well, you know, and just put a one size fits all, like Chinese people do this. And that's why in the book, I divided attitudes to Guanxi, to foreigners doing business in China, to locals, but also locals doing business in China, but also the age brackets. So we divided up into generations, and we could see that there was a different opinion of relationships in Guanxi in the older generation as opposed to the younger generation.
What about male, female?
Not really. Didn't see too much of a difference there in attitudes.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so now you have lived in Vietnam and well, throughout Asia, as well as England, U.S. And is Guanxi the same in China as it is in the American establishment, Chamber of Commerce, private finance clubs?
I think it exists everywhere in certain ways, but I think in China, it's very, it can become very challenging because of the obligation in many cases. It's an obligation if I do something for you that I then can, it's a network of sort of a reciprocity. So, you know, you did something for me, I have to do something for you. Or it almost, to simplify it, it almost looks bad on you if you don't. So almost nobody refuses. And that's where there's a challenge where relationships and Guanxi can lead into corruption, which is very difficult for international businesses who in many cases are bound by their home laws, certainly the UK and the US, when doing business on the international stage.
This refers to reciprocity. For instance, Chinese, I've been reading this. So the reciprocity could mean your Chinese host wants to get to know you in out of office experience, not out of body experience, but out of office experience, meaning at dinner or a walk in the park, or as you say, to visit a historic monument. And so that's a nice, and you're treated nicely. And then you're expected then, aren't you, to give something back, do something for your Chinese host.
And that's where the sort of the initial time period of getting to know people is getting to build those relationships. And then, yes, I mean, if you're a supplier based in, I don't know, let's come up with a scenario. You're a supplier based in Guangdong, and I'm based in the United States, and we've been doing business for 4 or 5 years, and you've done some favors for me. You might turn around and say, hey, how can you help my son get into, you know, Colombia? Oh, okay, it turns out you have some contacts there on the board. Okay, so there's more of a pressure. Whereas I think, and I could be wrong, but I think in the United States or the UK or Canada, you could say, no, that's too much. I don't wish to take, I can't do that for you. Whereas it would be a colossal loss of face, in my opinion, if you were to turn down such a request, and it would sort of jeopardize the business relationship. Whereas I think there's sort of the pragmatic side in the US or Canada, whereas, you know, if somebody were to ask someone a favor, which happens all the time, they decline, the business might not be affected by that. Whereas I think maybe more it's affected by that.
So we're talking with Dr. Andrew Woods, who has spoken at global business meetings in Seattle and San Francisco, and has been on our radio show. And this is, I think, the second or third time I think you've been on TV. So thank you very much. Doctor, what's your PhD in?
It's a doctorate in management with sort of a specialism in Chinese business, Chinese culture. The title is Doctor in Management, but all the research was in relationships, Guanxi. So some of the stuff in the book was kind of additional research that came out of the project. It was one of the most interesting projects I've worked on. I was very fortunate to work with Lyon University, which is a French university, which has a campus in Shanghai, and they're part of what's called the Grande École. So it's sort of the Ivy League of France, if you will. It's a wonderful business school, and I worked on multiple research projects, but the one that I found most interesting, I'm all about lived experiences. I mean, you can read all of this stuff in a textbook, but until it actually happens to you and you witness it, it's always different from what you read in the textbook. Before I went to China many years ago, I read pretty much everything I could get my hands on doing business in China, and found that when I got there, those books didn't prepare me in the slightest. It was the real lived experience of being on the ground. I think you can use this as sort of a foundation, but it's really when you're out there meeting with the people that you get a real flavor of what's happening and how exciting it is and how quickly it changes and how much opportunity exists for Western companies.
So let's talk about Lyon, and you're a leader and thought of that. And so you have a lot of connections yourself. What would be your price? And this is not corruption, but this is the reciprocity idea.
I don't sell connections, but I'm sure you can find people who will do that for you. I get rather alarmed when people say to me in China, "Well, if you hire me as a consultant, it's because of my Guanxi network." Uh, I have a lot of relationships in China from living there for so many years, but I tend to, I ask for favors, but I'm very happy to reciprocate, but I don't ask for favors that would jeopardize the relationship. I still have my Western style of thinking, which is, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But, I certainly don't, I mean, this is kind of going a little bit off track, but I don't look at what I find is happening a lot now is that people look at what's going on in China and different things, different business practices, and they say that's wrong, instead of saying, well, no, that's another country and another culture's way of doing things that have different rules, different norms, different laws. And I think there's somewhat of an arrogance where we as a countries that are, in the case of the United States, a couple hundred years old, and you have a civilization like China's 5,000 years of history, of course, they're going to do things in a different way.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Producer Paul, if we could go to this graphic, I know it's a little faint, but it will zero us in for conversational purposes on this is circles of influence, I guess, about Guanxi, and I'm not the expert, Doctor, you are. So in the middle there, I know it's hard to see, but it says strong interpersonal ties, and that's hard to do everywhere.
It is hard to do. It is hard to do. It's interesting is that, I've recently returned to Vancouver. I'm originally from Canada. I've spent most of my adult life in Asia and Europe. But I've recently returned here, and I was here in 2013 to about 2015. I spent a couple of years here. And what I found was that it's a tough city to crack as far as networks, but all of the groundwork that I set then is now, I'm contacting a lot of these people that I met in that time period, and that relationship is now carrying on. So I think that as long as there's different ways. I mean, I mentioned in the book the how Guanxi is being used now in social media, it's adapting and evolving among the younger cultures, and I think that I use it. I have my own sort of Guanxi, if you will, via LinkedIn. I keep in touch with as many people as possible, and that keeps my relationships alive. And it is challenging anywhere to keep those relationships, but I think in China in particular, some of the big ones that last for life are classmates. So my MBA classmates were a lot of them were from China, and I still have very strong relationships with them. Yet I don't have strong relationships. I did it in Cardiff in the UK, and I don't have very strong relationships with the people who were from Cardiff, but I do with the people who are from China. I apologize, I'm going a little off topic. Let's get back to the interpersonal ties. I think it's very challenging in any environment or in any country to do that. But in China, it's almost as if the roadmap is more clear if you understand and take the time to understand how to build these relationships.
Okay, let's talk about what we're looking at on this graphic. We're sort of above it, looking down into this thing, and at the outer ridge is the world, okay, and then we get closer is some relationship of some kind, and then we get closer into the middle. You will have established somehow trust and rapport and then trust, and from a deliverance or from a reciprocity of some kind. That is it actually meaningful personally, or is it just you haven't screwed me in a transaction, so you're going to go to the next level of trust with me, and then we'll try something else?
From my experience, what I sort of saw and what I've read are slightly different. But I think that, it's not just, you haven't screwed me on a deal. It's more like, you've spent some time to get to know me. We begin to know each other as people. We begin to, as I said, this process that a lot of Western people find too long and too challenging. Now, again, that's changing with the younger crowd who will sometimes just jump to deals straight away. It seemed to me like the older generation is more about relationship building. And again, that's not always the case, but yes, definitely it's as outsiders, it's very challenging. And it's also challenging understanding the way that people do business there, in the sense that, the amount of times, and it took me so long to learn this, that people would tell me they were interested in something, and that was almost to save my face, where they weren't really interested, but they didn't want to say no directly. I think the closer you get to people and the more time and the more the relationships develop, the more direct they can be with you. But this is, I think Western culture, in some ways, Chinese culture is more direct, and in other ways, it's much more indirect. So I have people that will ask me directly, how much money do you make? Why aren't you married? I am married, but they will ask those kinds of questions that a Westerner won't ask. But they might be less direct when it comes to you losing face, or if they don't like your product, they won't say, I don't like your product. Whereas I think maybe, and I could be wrong, but Americans would be a little bit more direct and say, no, I don't want this. Whereas a Chinese business person might write you back saying, oh, we're quite interested, please, get back to us at a later time. Again, these are just my own experiences. But yeah, there's a lot of differences. But I think that one of the biggest mistakes that companies make, Western companies make, is they don't take the time to learn these things. I had a potential client recently say to me, we're working with a very large grocery chain in China, helping Western brands get into that area, along with other things. But they said to me, well, there's no website, and they were quite disappointed, and they were quite, that made them lose trust in this whole concept of dealing with these people. And the reason there's no website is because websites don't really get used in China. They use WeChat much more, and WeChat is a social media platform that is very effective for, you have to look at the population, and the vast majority of Chinese also don't have laptops. They do all their dealings on the phone. So WeChat has become the number one way of doing business online, and with people like Alibaba and those type of outfits. But I think that people tend to think what works in their country should work in China, and countless companies, a lot of the big ones, Starbucks, KFC, McDonald's, came into China in the late 90s, early 2000s with all these wonderful ideas, and then realized they had to adapt considerably. Their HR practices wouldn't work. Their training and learning and development wouldn't work because it needed to be modified. And even more so, their menus wouldn't work. So, McDonald's, for example, now has a very Chinese menu, as well as the traditional sort of Big Mac and fries and those sort of things. And they're doing well. And KFC is very popular because they have Chinese dishes as well as, so people tend to not want to adapt, but when you're going to another culture, another society, another way of life, you need to adapt in order to be successful.
Of course. Now, WeChat is like what, a Facebook of some kind, right?
Well, it's a mega app, if you will. It has so many functions. I mean, you can pay your bills through it. You can order taxis. I mean, there's just so much you can do with it. But there's close to 1 billion people that use this on a regular basis. So it's a powerful app, and it's how a lot of companies advertise their wares. Whereas this company I mentioned, their website hadn't been updated since 2015, and the potential clients here were quite upset about the whole thing, because they felt that the internet, why wasn't there a website? So interesting.
So can I join WeChat?
Of course you can.
Yeah,
you can connect with me too.
And would the Chinese government monitor what I'm saying?
I don't think so. Certainly, Chinese law dictates that if a company, any company in China that's doing business has to give over its stuff if asked. I mean, the same could be argued that I'm sure if Facebook is asked, it's giving over the stuff as well, but it's not maybe being as publicized. I'm not really talking about things that I really fear anybody knowing what I'm up to, but it's a wonderful app for communicating with Chinese people, and for doing business in China, it's pretty much essential.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Thank you.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a timely announcement.
Hi, I'm Sergei Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we're researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Now, saving face means, well, you're being exceedingly kind to me. And so, like we're on TV or something, right? Oh, yeah, we are. But let's assume that we're not on TV. And if I say something that you find weird, you're going to tell it to me. Or maybe you won't because you don't want me to feel bad.
Let me give you an example, kind of a early initiation into my time in China. I mentioned my classmates had become very good friends, and then we wound up doing business together. They invited me in end of 2008 to come to Shanghai and settle down there. And it was a sort of a leap of faith. I'd been there many times before on business, but not living there full time. And they said, don't worry, we'll look after you, etc. So, I believed in that. And it was all down to the fact that we were classmates. And I had read that that is a very important element of culture, is the relationships among classmates. So I came over and I was sitting in the boardroom, and my friend stroke classmate was the CEO of this very large advertising firm in Shanghai. And I was sitting in the room and he began discussing his vision. And I kind of piped up and I said, I've got an idea that I think maybe might be better than this. And I was very quickly stepped on under the table. And my friend, who also was a classmate, who was a very effective interpreter, leaned over and said, don't do that. You need to give face. Don't argue. And I wasn't arguing. I was just saying, I think I have a better idea. But the fact of the matter is that was the boss. And maybe I could have said that in private, but to say that in front of everybody else was a loss of face to him in the eyes of the interpreter. And I learned later to sort of adapt. It wasn't a major deal. These guys had spent some time in the West. They were kind of aware of the way business operates and the differences of business and culture. But it was an early lesson that, maybe I need to adapt. And that's something that the whole time I was in China, I always hear these people that say they're China experts. I'm not even close to being that. I could live there 1,000 years if someone finds some elixir to keep me around that long. One can wish. If I lived there 1,000 years, I don't think I'd be a China expert. It's almost like saying, well, he lives in New York City and he's a United States expert. Well, how much does he know about Alabama and Arkansas? And it takes years to understand the business culture and I would like to say I know more than most, and I've lived the experiences, but I'm constantly learning and love it and miss being there, miss being in the thick of things, and want to get back to some of that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that deep dive. So, Doctor, you're a professor in Vancouver now, right? And who are your students?
Well, I'm actually, I teach a little bit, but I'm actually helping international students to be prepared for the Canadian job market. So I go out and I speak to industry here and I say, look, I've got some great students from really all over the world, Ed, from a lot from Japan, a lot from South America and Latin America. And I teach them the cultural pieces of Canada, if you will, how to behave at interviews, how to market yourself effectively, how to write a Canadian resume, which is quite different from the resumes that come out of Japan or come out of Latin America, South America, and practice interview skills with them and then send them out. And it's so rewarding that even during the pandemic was able to place so many of these students into positions around town, co-op positions. Occasionally I get to jump in the classroom, and I'm going to be doing more of that at a different university in the fall, teaching a class there. So, it's incredibly rewarding, and I get to jump in the classroom every now and then to do soft skills training. I do a lot of talks on sales, negotiations, effective interview techniques, resume building. So it's fascinating to be looking now at other cultures. I've spent so much time dealing with Chinese culture, and now I'm learning so much about South America, Latin America, and Japanese culture, which is fascinating.
Wow, this is great. So in the book, in the part that I read, that there's another graphic on page 12, which we do not have in front of us here. But it's a big chart that shows the transformation of relationships done in like a bar chart format.
Okay.
It's real interesting. And I do not have it on screen here. But if you could look at that and sort of take us through the transformation of a relationship. Basically, that's what my take has been from looking at that this morning. That
Okay.
it look like it describes in a bar chart format a transgression or transformation from one thing to another.
Yeah. If it's the one I think you're referring to, it sort of starts off with, you know, I think the more effective one is I don't have it in front of me, but the more effective one is the circular one that you showed about the outsiders. And so they're quite similar. So, you know, you start off the relationship as an outsider. So you start off as an outsider with limited contacts. You then begin to develop those contacts, and the network is such, like it can be here, is that someone will refer you to someone else. Now you're slightly indebted to the first person who referred you to the next person, so you've moved up the channel. So that person then is entitled, if you will, to ask you for a similar favor. So maybe you need to then introduce them to someone. If you don't, you're breaking that circle of trust. Where the danger lies is that when you work your way through the circle or the bar graph, if Guanxi your relationships ever get to the stage where they're balanced and nobody owes anything to anyone, it's almost as if the relationship is gone in a strange way. So it always needs to be like I use the example of when we were kids, we would play on the teeter-totter or the seesaw, whatever you call it, you know, where one's up, one's down. And it's sort of the same thing, is that, you know, you introduce me to someone, I introduce you to someone, you get a deal and you get in on an inner circle and you meet a new group of people. Well, maybe then I might ask you to invite me to a dinner that involves me getting to know those people. And then that relationship branches off in another direction. Again, it's quite similar to the way it works in the West. There's a lot of like mystique and mystery around this concept, but it's actually quite simple, but it also deeply involves you know, classmates, family, friends. Family can pretty much ask you for anything, but at the same time, you then would have, you know, they would have to reciprocate as well. So, you know, I've seen instances of my own family asking for requests and that being granted back and forth. But, you know, as far as business is concerned, it's just a network of relationships and reciprocity, and it's trying to keep that not completely balanced, but keep returning and back and forth like the seesaw, if you will.
Thank you for that analogy. Okay, so yeah, that other chart, I think it was page 12, but it showed relationship marketing, or marketing based on relationships, and then moving backwards in time, initial no relationship, but wanting to break in, and then a progression. So it's the same kind of thing. So in the pages that I read earlier today, it seemed like quite formal language. It seemed like the progression was a state objective, like a moonshot, to open China up, okay, to not be closed within, but to learn the ways of the world and do more, grow more, and everyone will benefit in China if it's done right. And
okay, so Mao ran, or was sort of the founder of modern China, if you will, and he died in 1976. And in the late 70s, Deng Xiaoping came up with the concept of 改革开放, which is opening up to the world. And he also came up with the slogan, "It's glorious to get rich." So, which is kind of the, I don't know, the antithesis of the whole concept of communism. But it's very much in many ways it's a more capitalist society in my opinion than the United States. It's so entrepreneurial and so go. But the interesting thing is, yes, it was seen that we need to open up to the rest of the world. And what I find fascinating is the amount of Chinese that study in the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, and want to learn about Western culture. And that's where we perhaps lag behind, is that at this stage, we should be encouraging our younger sort of university going group to go and learn about, Japanese culture, Vietnamese, Chinese, go and learn and explore and, expand your cultural intelligence, if you will, or knowledge, or even go to Europe. But what I found amazing is the amount of Chinese that want to learn about Western culture, want to learn about the way we do things here, and are always asking questions when you're there. What is it like to, what's it like going to a barbecue? I was even asked once by some students, because they were going to exchange, and one of the invitations or planned things on the program was a barbecue. And they were like, well, what would we do there? What would we talk about? What I love is the desire to learn, the desire to better oneself. And I think that, I gave the example the other day to a group of students. I was saying that, at the beginning of the summer on my laneway in Shanghai, where I was living, where my family has a house, at the beginning of the summer when the students were off, excuse me, you would hear these violins going and various musical instruments, and the sound, Ed, was piercing. It was horrible. By the end of the summer, it sounded like the New York Philharmonic. It was incredible. But these kids were studying for multiple hours a day. It's this desire to, and it comes down to incredible competition, I think, but it's desire to constantly be getting better. And I love the curiosity and the interest and the questions and the desire to understand the West more and do business more. And I think it makes a lot of sense. It's very encouraging.
So the language in the extract that I read this morning was very, very formal, academic, about how to and the meaningfulness of it, and how to think about the stages of relationship from a transaction. It was written in a formal step 1, step 2, step 3, and almost like an explanation of the mentality and the why of doing things. Whereas you and I would think of this as like, not even thinking about it, we're just doing it. But it's like teaching the reader the Chinese thinking from an elementary point of view.
Well, the whole concept of the book evolved from research that was being done for a university. So it was trying to give a much more detailed, and then backing it up with lots of facts and lots of areas to dive in more deeply. So there's a lot of sort of citations and suggestions of how to dive. One of the questions I get asked a lot is how Guanxi is evolving and how the young are dealing with it. It's quite interesting is that when you look at, there's a concept called swift Guanxi, which is mentioned in the book, which is, it's kind of done online, which is sort of the way of we do it here when you have your, Yelp reviews and things like that. So it's people validating other people and or products, giving sort of testimonials, and how if enough people give said testimonials, it almost creates what we call swift Guanxi, builds trust among the people.
And so I read that Wechat has a channel for that.
Yes, a lot of so you can develop, rather like you can on LinkedIn, you can develop your own company channels and selling channels, and people can comment and sort of endorse products. And it's sort of like the way I look at things like eBay and stuff like that, is if a seller has 100% and they've sold feedback and they've sold, multiple thousands of a product, I very much trust them more than a seller who sold 100 products and has 97%. because they always have these relatively high rankings. You don't see any low rankings, but at the same time, I tend to trust more when the numbers or the data speaks for, because I don't know these people, but at least it's giving me some form of, and the sort of articles that were coming out of this were talking about how Guanxi can be created in this way for companies. But then it becomes treacherous in the fact that I don't know if you've been reading about this, but a lot of these Yelp reviews turn out to be bought and fraudulent, and I think the same thing can happen there. But it's an interesting concept about how these things evolve.
And the beat goes on.
And the beat goes on. Yeah.
So, Dr. Andrew Woods, thanks for being our guest. This has been an education, and I invite you to come back. Is there something that you'd like to say in summary of Guanxi and saving face, and how important that is?
The direct answer is no, but I've got something else to say, and that is, it relates slightly. It's when you do business anywhere, I think, and I hope this doesn't come across as condescending, but just take the time to understand the culture that you're going into, the way they operate. This can all be found and researched beforehand. It's never the same as actually being there, but the tremendous amount of opportunities that exist for Western companies. It's not all smooth sailing. Some things may go wrong. There will be challenges, but the opportunities far outweigh the challenges. And I just say, go for it. I mean, go for it. Get out there, get out to Asia. In fact, it's just growing. And it's not just China, it's India, Vietnam, all the ASEAN countries are just booming. And there's opportunity there. There's even opportunity for small firms that want to get out. So you have a small product and maybe you just want to dip your toe in. And I think it looks great even for local marketing. If you can say, well, we're a local craft brewer, but we also are a big seller in China. I mean, that's fabulous. So just go for it. And if you need assistance, contact the right people. I'm happy to assist people and even do discovery calls at no charge. So if people want to do that, I mean, just reach out and contact and go for it. I mean, we can't just look at local markets now. The Chinese know how to sell to us. We know that. So we need to learn how to be more effective in selling our products overseas. Yeah.
So what do you think of this that just came out of the G7 meeting, this being June 14, 2021, about a U.S.-led initiative to compete with the Belt Road?
Okay, so I say it's great. I say, the more people that are investing in countries that need economic investment, the better.
Right.
It'll bring them up the value chain quickly. There's controversy about Idai Ilu, or One Belt One Road, which was a project that was set up a few years ago. It's actually our website. When I bought that website, it was called One Belt One Road. It's now called Belt and Road. I mentioned in our last conversation that the Belt and Road Forum was held a few times, but unfortunately, the big banners all said "barf" on them, Belt and Road Forum. That didn't translate very well, and I'm sure that person was quickly moved from his or her position. The Belt and Road Forum, the Belt and Road, or One Belt One Road is looking at investing extra capacity. So investing in building infrastructure in developing countries, and it was led by China. And I think the U.S. has copped on it. This is a massive infrastructure project, a trillion plus. And that they need, if they're going to continue being a global leader, or they need to get involved in these kind of things as well. So I think it's great that there's competition.
Yeah, I totally agree. Dr. Andrew Woods, thank you for being our guest. And go check him out. Go get that book. Is it on Amazon?
No, it's going to be on Amazon, though. I'm just in the process of. So yeah, it will be on Amazon, and if anyone reaches out directly, I can probably get them a copy, hard copy.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Fabulous. Thank you.
This is Ed in San Diego, and that's Dr. Andrew Woods in Vancouver, BC. Global TV Talk Show. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.